Hi, welcome to Fiberchats. My name is Irina, and my guest today is Kara from Campfire Knits.
Hi,
Welcome. Um,
thank you for having me.
it's my pleasure. I've been a customer of yours for like a bunch of years now. I think I found you on Instagram long, long time ago, and you're Boston girl. You're local.
hmm
How did you initially get into the yarn dyeing? Like, what was how how did you start?
Yeah, it was never fully planned for me. So, I had just moved back to the Boston area. I had finished a graduate program, and I didn't know quite how to fill all of the sudden leftover time that I had now that I was done with school. So I was taking the train into Boston on my commute, and I thought to myself, well, I can really only reasonably knit myself so many things. So maybe I'll start to knit some stuff and I can sell them at craft shows or things like that. And then when I started to price out what I would have to charge reasonably for those kinds of items, I was like, well, this is not going to work. But what if I dyed my own yarn and I made those items? Then I could maybe justify a higher price, which eventually over time whittled down to, what if I just dyed yarn? Let me give that a try. And I bought just some random skeins of wool. I bought a small little dye kit and I just started playing, and it was some of the worst things I've ever seen. It was terrible. I did it looked awful. I was like, what? I can't do this. This is not going to go well. But I just continued playing with it. The first time that I made something that I truly loved, I had no plan whatsoever. And from there it really snowballed.
How did you
Yeah,
first like even know how to dye yarn? Like the very first time you dyed yarn, like did you watch it on YouTube? Did you read about it?
I read about it. I think I got a little bit too in the weeds at first because I remember reading about people balancing the pH of the water and certain acidity and ways to apply this and temperature, and I got really overwhelmed. So I stopped reading at one point. I got the safety information. Okay, I need a mask. I need to have gloves. I need to protect the space that I'm working in. But after that, I abandoned a lot of some of what people were saying, either in tutorials, in videos, what I read online. And I just started going with my gut. I figured out different techniques on my own of what happens if I play with a lower temperature or a higher temperature, or the order in which I apply dyes. So I never really fully learned from anyone or from anything. I got little tips along the way to make sure I was being safe, or that I was, making sure it wasn't going to bleed all over people's fingers. Uh, but aside from that, it was just a lot of trial and error and playfulness.
Right. So when did you start knitting?
I don't even remember. My mom has knitted my entire life, and she showed me when I was really little. And I picked it up, and then I became a teenager, and I just didn't have time for it at that point. And back in college, um, I picked it up again, little by little. But there was one day in particular that I remember. I was in just Joann's Fabrics with my mom, and we're walking around, and I see this free pattern for a Fair Isle pair of socks. And I was like, I'm gonna make that. I need to make that. My mom's like, you haven't knit in I don't know how long. You can't just pick it up and do Fair Isle. And I was like, yes, I will. I will figure this out. It was the tightest stitches I've ever seen. It did not come out well. But that was the approach that I took at the time. And I really still kind of take that, where I see either a challenge or something that just takes my breath away, and I want to go for it. I want to learn how to do it. So I learned when I was really young, but I'd probably say maybe 19, 20 years old was when I picked it back up. And then it was just full steam ahead from there.
Do you have like your entire wardrobe made by you? Like, have you
I
tried using
wish.
everything?
I really wish. It's like kind of a bucket list sort of thing that I just want to have a mostly self-made wardrobe. I have a few sewn items. I have a whole lot of knit items for myself. And I've just started getting into the visible mending. So all of the little things that I have already that might have tiny holes, I'm like, oh, I'm not going to get rid of that. I'm going to patch this up or like try to do something decorative. So if I can't have an entirely self-made wardrobe, I want to have something that has my little signature stitch on it.
It's so funny because my grandma, like I remember it so vividly, she had that wooden mushroom, and I was probably like, I want to say 6 or 7, and she was teaching me how to mend socks. And until now, this is like my fondest memory of her and our time together. Because it's just like it's so meditative. It's so like you sort of like you take an item that's ruined and you make it new.
Yeah, and I actually just bought one of those mushrooms so I can do more of these projects. I always used to be that type of individual. Like when I was a little girl, if I was reading a book and I accidentally bent the spine, I've ruined the book. Like there's an imperfection in it. I have ruined the book. This is so terrible. And now I'm embracing a little bit more of that, those imperfections. And with visible mending, I'm not trying to hide it. I'm showcasing what's there and what other sort of like little pretty little bits can be on it.
How do you decide what to mend? Like what gonna decorate that surface?
I think it's a combination of the item that I have on hand. So if it's something that I made and I poured a lot of time and effort into, or there's something really memorable about the fabric or about the yarn, then I'm definitely going to take that time. If it's some of my older fast fashion items that are uh, going out already, then that's something that I'll try to recycle. But the things that I've like felt value in, those are the ones that I really want to showcase and I want to hold on to and put my mark on.
And when did you start sewing? Was that also like as a kid?
Yeah, I think I was seeing my parents somewhat recently and I came across a little like doll quilt that I made when I was probably 6 or 7 years old. That was, I think, the first sewing project that I ever did. I took a long break from that as well in my like early teen and teenage years, but I've gotten back into it probably in the last decade, a lot more sewing projects, crafting overall.
Right. Do you remember your first knitting project?
Oh, yeah. I mean, aside from really terrible squares, the I think the Fair Isle socks that I found from at Joann's, I never actually finished them. Uh, they remained unfinished until the day that I found the yarn again, and there were some holes in that, and the stitches were too tight, and I abandoned that. But that's the first project that I can remember really working on, aside from some garter stitch color blocked
Right.
scars, which I was very proud of because I changed colors.
um, do you like knitting Fair Isle now? Is that
I do. I
like
do. I
what
love it
about it?
now. Um, I think it's the way the pattern emerges as you keep on going because you develop this technique where you kind of get into that rhythm. I hold the two strands on two different fingers. I know some people have a technique they can do it on one, and I am impressed. I can't do that. Um, but it's the way it's similar with just one strand, but with two colors, you're sitting there and you're working on something, and slowly as you keep on going around, this design, this pattern begins to come forward, and it's gorgeous on the other side as well, looking at
Right.
all the floats that are on the back.
I'm
So there's
actually
just
like
something.
obsessing over the floats. Every time
Yeah.
I'm knitting, I'm like I'm posting the picture of the floats and I'm like, can we all just stop and admire my floats for a second?
Like when you get the really nice consistent ones on the back, you're like, can I get away with wearing this inside? I
Right.
actually have a skirt. I bought it, but it's Fair Isle, but it was designed to be worn inside out.
Oh, that's so
And I
cool.
was like, this is so strange, but I love it. I also want to wear it the other way. I can just reverse this. I can do this with all of my clothes.
um, when you do the Fair Isle project, so my biggest problem with Fair Isle is not tension, but coming up with the colors. And for some reason, when I'm thinking about you, it seems like it would be even more difficult for you because you're the yarn dyer. Is that the case? Or it's like, does it come naturally to you?
I think it depends. So I really struggled early on because I would get into my head coordinating colors, but sometimes they would be too matching and
Right.
you would just completely lose the pattern in there. I think time has gone on. I've gotten better at selecting some of those colors, either for myself or putting together some kits of, do I want to go with any sort of contrasting colors on the color wheel, things that are complementary, not adding in too many variegated colors, because that can really muddy the design. So I've developed the skill. I was not very good at that at first, but it's definitely come a long way.
Right. Um, I saw one of your posts. It was March of 2020. And it was a little bit shocking because your post was saying, please don't buy yarn from me. Because there are other people out there who need your business more, and I want to concentrate on them, and I'll survive without you buying my yarn. So please find other people who need it more. Is that your like way you are in a lot of things? Like, are you always that selfless?
It's oh, I'm gonna have a hard time answering that because it's hard to even be like, oh, I'm so selfless because yeah. Um,
I just never
that is what
seen
I try.
anything like that. Like, I have not seen a single dyer who said that. So I was very impressed.
Thank you. Um, yeah, I made that decision. I I was fortunate to have a job throughout the pandemic. Um, and I'm in a number of different Facebook groups for independent dyers, and seeing people on Instagram or in those posts talking about the struggle with losing their in-person shows, figuring out how to recoup these sales online, because there are a lot of people who this business is their primary source of income. This is their livelihood. And in the work that I do in my day job, I work at a college as an administrator, and I deal especially with students who are at risk for their academics or in their personal lives. So I see a lot of that, and I think it's just developed in me a sense of wanting to do whatever I can that is right. So that's why I try to donate money from the sales of my yarn to organizations that I've looked into, why I made that request to try to find some other local dyers, people that are really struggling in that moment because they've just experienced a massive loss for their own livelihoods. And I wasn't going to experience that.
Right.
So I wanted to try to push that forward.
I want to ask you another question. So I started buying your yarn. I want to say like right when I started knitting. Like somehow I stumbled on your account and right away I loved your colors and I was buying yarn. And then I discovered all different indie dyers. I became great friends with some of them. But somehow I always kept coming back to you and like always checking on you. And sometimes the store would be empty and it would be like Kara's taking temporary vacation or whatever, like break from the store, check on us later. And I would check on you later. Do you have a lot of customers like that? Do you have a lot of return customers? Do you have a lot of people who stayed with you through the years?
I do. It's been really great, especially in like the local greater Boston type of community. I've been able to meet people in person at some of our in-person shows. I've been able to get to know people more on social media, and I definitely see those return individuals or people reaching out and saying, hey, what's the next event that you're doing? I would love to come and see you, or showing me their finished projects. And I love all of that. I don't really know how it all happened, and I'm grateful for it.
Right.
It's it's something that just happened over time and I can't fully explain it. But I'm really happy it did.
How do you choose the who you're gonna donate money to? What companies, what organizations?
When I start, so I have a baseline that I do each year where I donate 5% each to the National Park Foundation and to Camp Sunshine in Casco, Maine. The National Park Foundation, because I, had a long-standing series of colors in my yarn lineup that were based on the national parks, and that's something that's really important to me. Yes, there's one of them
The
right
red
there.
one.
Um, and the other one, Camp Sunshine, I I looked really heavily into them. They're a wonderful organization that provides an outdoor retreat, sort of week-long retreats for children and their families. And the children oftentimes have terminal illnesses. So it gives them a space for families to come together. They get to know one another. They're going through a lot of the same things. So it all centers around that outdoor environment and being out with nature and everything. And I loved what that organization stands for and the way they give back to their community. So I wanted to help do that as well. And here and there, I'll give to other organizations as I see fit after looking into them. Charity Navigator is a great spot to look into that.
Oh, that's a good tip. So the national parks series of the yarn that you've done, are you inspired by nature in general, or like where do you draw your inspiration?
A lot of it is nature. Um, I that's just a lot of what I feel connected to. A whole lot. It'll be like I have so many different photos on my phone where I'm walking down a street on a rainy day in fall, and there's just like a little pile of leaves, and it looks wonderful, and it's shiny with the rain, and that strikes, and I'm like, I want to capture this in something, and I'll try to grab those colors and create them and apply them to yarn to capture that same kind of essence of what I saw walking down the street.
Right. Um, you see sunset. Do you imagine shawl or sweater?
Ooh, Pisces, I feel like that one I would probably go more towards a shawl because after we moved recently, and as I was packing up and unpacking, I look at most of the things that I've made for myself and they're all in usually the most earthy tones. I don't make a lot of bold, bright colors for myself, but I have more of that in like the accent pieces. So I think I see shawl when I think something like that.
Do you usually prefer like smaller projects or something like a sweater, like something larger?
Um, I What have I been doing more recently? I've done a lot of larger projects, I think, in the recent weeks. I'm almost finished with a cabled cardigan. I just have to pick up the edge stitches and do that ribbing. I am working on another fading point shawl by Hohi. I gave my last one to my mom and I wanted one for myself, and I had some yarn stashed away for probably a solid 2 years. I said it's time for me to work on this. But I do love to keep a small project at the ready to just throw in my bag, and I don't have to bring a whole other yarn tote with me, and I can just have a small project, but definitely larger ones more recently.
So how many projects do you usually work on at the same time? Like,
I think, I think right now I only have two. I try to keep it to about that because otherwise I just think to myself, where are my needles? Where are my interchangeable needles? I don't know what project they're on or which bin it might be in. So I just try to max it out at two.
what about your personal yarn stash? What does that look like?
Right now, I haven't unpacked that. That's still in boxes, but it's a big mix. It's some of mine because sometimes I would see things come out and I went, Yeah, I really want to make something out of this. And I would be a little bit selfish with my own product. Um, I do try to buy a lot of other indie dyers. Whenever I'm out of town, I try to find a local yarn store to purchase something as a souvenir for myself to try to make something. So I have some odds and ends, mixture of various yarns. I have a lot of remnants in my stash as well that I'm going to try to weave with. But yeah, I would say it's a big mixture of some independent dyers, a few larger ones. I have some, everyone has a little bit of Malabrigo in their stash. Um, I think that's most of what I really have.
Right. So let's talk about your weaving. How
Yes.
long ago did you get into that?
That I purchased my weaving loom early last year. So I think it was just pre-pandemic. And then the first shutdown happened, and I thought to myself, well, now's a great time to learn how to weave because I'm not going anywhere.
Did you feel like you lacking enough hobbies? Like you needed another one? Are you
Oh
like
yeah,
ever afraid that like this is another rabbit hole that like you getting lost in?
I'm pretty sure my partner is just thinks there is something very wrong with me in that regard with the different projects that I have, but he accepts it. Um, no, I picked that up because I mean it's not a small thing that you can just pick up. A weaving loom is it's large.
Right.
I didn't get one of the big floor models, but it's still a large item that I purchased. Um, and I went into it with the intent of like, I can make items so quickly and easily. And then just like my first attempt with dyeing, it is not as easy as I thought it was. Like I had all these bumpy little edges, but I reached out to another friend of mine on Instagram that I've saw a lot of her weaving, and I was like, please tell me what I'm doing wrong. Please help me. And she gave me some pointers, and that was really helpful. So I've done a few weaving projects over the last year, nothing that I really posted because either it was a gift and it was a family member that was following me, so I didn't want to update things, or it was just something that I was kind of casually doing, not something I was doing for the purpose of posting on social media or anything like that. But I am going to get back into it again very soon.
What's your relationship with Instagram? Like how do you see that?
It's gotten more relaxed over the last year. Um, I think when I first started, I used to have a reminder come up on my phone to like, oh, take a picture and post it today. Don't forget to do that. And it would almost be it became a little bit stressful.
Right.
I have to find content. I have to figure something out to post. And when everything happened last year, I actually got cut off from being able to dye yarn for a while because where I dye is not in my home. It's located at my parents' house in their basement. I have a setup over there because we were renting a place. I wasn't able to have it where I lived, but I wanted to have a setup, and they allowed me to do that. So I was cut off from my yarn dyeing, and I was like, what do I do? How
Right.
do I post on my account without that? And it caused me to reflect a little bit more about the ways in which I'm using social media and the frequency in which I'm on there. So I think that, as I get a little bit more back into the dye studio, which I am in the coming weeks, I've done a little bit more recently as well that I just haven't posted about yet. I'll probably pick things up a little bit more, but I think I didn't want to post just for the sake of it. I want to post when I have something meaningful to say or something to update people on or something that I want to engage about. Otherwise, I'll still scroll and I'll like people's posts or I'll make comments when I'm on there. But yeah, I think that's how my relationship has changed, especially over the last year and a half.
Right. Do you meet like other people that inspire you, either other dyers or designers? Like, do you find inspiration on Instagram?
Hmm. I definitely do. Whether it's seeing new patterns that come up, I've literally gasped sometimes when I've seen a few designs and saved it and be like, I need to do this. Um, Seeing other people's colors and on the one hand, like thinking to myself, that's not something that I would do for my business, but that is beautiful. I appreciate that. Or, oh, I've envisioned something similar to that for me. And keeping in the back of my head, like, is it okay for me to make color like that? Is it going to be too close? Are they going to think I'm copying? There's only so many colors in the world that we can realistically make. Um, yeah, but I love seeing what other people are producing and what they're putting out and what they're designing. I think it's all fantastic.
Right. Do you have problem ever picking colors, the names for the colors?
Yes. Yes. Sometimes my brain will try to operate in reverse and I'll think of a name and then I'll try to match a color to it, and that hardly ever works. You can't go into a dye project trying to envision an exact outcome because it's 99% of the time it's not going to work. So I'll try to like make colors and then I've definitely made them and go, I don't know what to name this. I have no idea whatsoever. That's actually how I came up with the entropy series that I started doing, which were my like one pot, one of a kind sort of colors. I didn't want to come up with a zillion different names for them. So if it was a one of a kind yarn, it was just going to be entropy. It was just going to be the chaos of the universe in the form of a skein of yarn.
Those are beautiful, actually. So I
They're
was,
some of my favorites.
yeah. Well, do you have a favorite color?
Um, I oscillate a little bit. I really love like aqua teal as a color, and I also love orange, and I love the both of them together. Yep. That kind of sums it up.
Actually, like I love your teals and I love your blue. I mean, like anybody who knows me by now knows that like people start calling me Smurfette just for my love of blue. So like I mean, I don't think I ever met a blue that I haven't liked. But yours are just like very vivid and very saturated. And actually, you know which one is probably my one of my favorites is Nantucket.
Hmm.
Like I've made so many things with that. Like I think I bought like more than sweater quantity. Like I think I bought like 6 skeins of it, and I kept making different things with it. Just I just like love that color because it's not like it's very subdued sort of, but deep blue with like it feels like very moody somehow.
Yeah, I didn't want it to be, I didn't want it to be like a bright blue, and I didn't want it to be a navy blue. I was like, I need to pull it down just a little bit, but not go too dark with it. And yeah, I love the result of that one.
Right. Do you do you ever like make a color, not happy with it, remake the color, still not happy with it, go back and forth until you like get something that you like absolutely love? Or do you think, well, maybe I don't love this color, but somebody else will love that color?
A little bit of both. So I've made colors before that I just really did not like. And some of the time I will over dye them. So I'll either just like start applying some other random colors to it or darker colors to try to make something new. Or if I have the result, it's not bad, it's just not my personal preference. I might take the approach of like, well, someone else still might really enjoy this. And I've seen that happen. I can't remember what the color was off the top of my head, but there was one that I did sell, and it was a short, it was just a small batch of it. And there was one person that just loved it and wanted to buy all of it. So I was like, okay, fantastic. Like, I'm so glad that this worked out. And I didn't go too hard on judgment of myself that I didn't put this out for sale.
But there are also like sometimes colors that I would normally like never use, but then like as a trim of a sweater or something, like as a little accent, they work absolutely brilliantly. So sometimes like you don't even know what people use your colors for.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. Um, what's your like professional dream when it comes to yarn dyeing? Is there like some ambition, some big plan for the future, like once the COVID hopefully goes away?
I don't know if I have a big plan for it. Right now, my philosophy behind the business is play. That is that's something that has really changed for me over time. Um, there was a period where almost every single weekend I was down in that basement working, dyeing batches and batches of yarn. And there was one time where I was so tired and also honestly just so exhausted with the colors that I was making that I just started making mistakes upon mistakes upon mistakes. And I thought to myself, I'm not enjoying this.
Right.
And after that happened, I took a little break and I thought to myself, how can I bring that enjoyment, that joy back to what it is that I do? Um, and I've started to find more of that again over this last year. And I think I see it some again, like I said before, some of my favorite colors that I make are the entropy colorways. I don't write anything down. I just grab what feels right, what I think will look really nice together, and I put it into the dye pot. And what comes out are some of the best colors that I feel like I make. So I'm embracing this playful philosophy. So I think my business right now is just my opportunity to play.
Right.
It's my artistic playfulness that I get to share with other people.
Do you ever do custom colors? Like, do people approach you to like realize their vision, designers or regular people, regular knitters?
I've only gotten a few requests actually, and for the most part, they were more solid colors than anything else. I haven't done any custom variegated colors before, and I think that would be interesting in the future.
Right. Well, maybe we'll talk one day.
I know.
We'll do something fun. Um, do you prefer variegated colors to solids, like for yourself?
Depends on the project, I think. Um, the color work, I'm starting to go all in on more of the solids or like kind of tonal colors to really make those patterns shine. But when it comes to, you know, big blocks of one color of yarn, I love the variegated. I really do. Just seeing how it's going to pool in different places and what kind of like the little exciting bits of color pops that you might get in like a speck of something and where it comes through.
Right.
I really love working with variegated.
So at some point, I think I remember seeing you publish a pattern as a designer. Is that something you wanna do? Was that just a try and then you decided not to do it? What was happening there?
I had a vision. So I've published two cowl patterns, and I made them for free, and I just had a thought in my mind of I want to make this foresty outdoor looking cowl pattern, and I just sketched out some design. I grabbed like little graph paper, and I'm also I don't my brain loves puzzles and figuring that out. So there was the math of the cowl of how many stitches and how many pattern repeats will there be and how can I fit this pattern into into the number of stitches that there are. So it was like a puzzle for me, and I loved working through that. Big pattern design when it comes to sweater construction, even shawl construction, I'm lost. I'm not sure I'm going to go down that. That might be the one hobby pathway I don't venture down.
Right. Um, do you ever get like overwhelmed? Like you mentioned that like you were getting overwhelmed with the dyeing of colors, right? Do you ever feel that pressure with knitting? Do you ever feel like you must knit something, you must finish something? Do you impose self-impose deadlines on yourself?
I don't. Not when it comes to knitting projects. Um, knitting the actually, let me backtrack because gifts, holiday gifts, that's the one time there are those deadlines. I try to finish that on time. Aside from that, when it's for me, I do not set a deadline because I've seen this happen in other areas with myself and also with my mom. She and I talk about this all the time, that if I'm the one that's setting the deadline and then I'm stressing out about it, all I'm doing is literally stressing out myself. So my projects are for me. I'm going to take them at whatever pace I have. I have an entire list in Ravelry of projects and like the due dates that I want to finish. I've never held myself to that. I I think maybe one project I've finished within a deadline that I've set.
Right. Do you feel like you must knit gifts with your own yarn? Like, is that an expectation you think there is?
No, I do for some. So I think it depends on um, the receiver. You know, it's one of those things where I love my family, I love my friends, but not all of them know how to love our knit gifts. And so if I'm knitting something for, um, I know it's going to get tossed around, I may or may not use my yarn, just because I know like it might pill a little bit more easily with the washing machine and things like that. But I have, and I'll continue to use some of my yarn for projects and for gifts. But there's also other yarn from other dyers that I just love. And if I see something that someone else has made and it makes me think of a person, I'm going to go ahead and support that dyer and buy that yarn and make it for the person I had in mind. I'm not going to try to recreate that color.
Right. Do you feel like most people out there are knit worthy or not?
Ooh, mm. Everyone is worthy of receiving a knit gift. Maybe just not always from me. From all of the other close people to them. But after knowing how much time and effort and love goes into these projects, not everyone always knows that. And it's a little heartbreaking sometimes to see something either just set off to the side or, it's treated, I don't know. I go back and forth, I think, because if something is really well worn and it's well used, like that's exactly the point. You don't want a gift just sitting on a shelf untouched and just perched there dust free. You want someone to use it and to love it.
Right.
So there's that one side. But then there's the other side of like, is it going to be disregarded? But I think for the most part, like people are deserve to get wonderful gifts. And if it happens to be a knit item, it happens to be a knit item.
Have anybody ever knitted something for you?
Yep. I mean, my mom has made me so many different things over the years. And so earlier this year, my grandmother had passed away, and she she started using my yarn later on. So she's still knit. She was 96 years old and she was still
That's
knitting
so
hats.
wonderful.
Yeah. But she made some stuff for me as well. And those are definitely things that I hang on to.
Right. If somebody wants to get into the yarn dyeing business, what would be your advice? What would you warn them against? What would you encourage them to do?
I think telling people that they should, definitely read about it, read about safety, make sure that they are, you know, have their mask, have their gloves, have everything they need to safely do their dyeing process, and then stop reading. Don't go any further and just start playing and see what happens. I think as soon as I stopped reading and I stopped paying attention to temperature and acidity and all of these other intricate details is the time that I started loving it and started finding my mark and my design and my style.
Do you have you had like issues marketing, or like do you have any tips on marketing?
Um, I think start small. So if it's someone who's starting out, figuring out how can I physically get out there? And I know right now there's still some challenges with that. Not as many, there's like in-person shows are starting to come back. That is what really got things going for me, is when I started doing in-person shows and speaking with people and they could pick it up and they could squish it and they could feel it. So get out physically out there. And if something like that is not available, start networking online. I know as I looked more into like Instagram, hashtags were great for me for that. I would just click on a hashtag and see who was showing up, what kinds of things were in that feed, what interests me, this intrigues me, and I would follow them. And some of people would follow me back, and all of a sudden I would get other followers because I followed an account. And it really cascades from there, I think. So I think it's engagement, whether it's in person or it's online.
Right. You mentioned on your website that you changed how you work, the bases that you work with this over this past year. Why did that happen? How did that happen?
So similar to what you were saying earlier from March of last year, and I said, don't buy my yarn. There's other folks who are out there. Um, Historically, I've bought my bases. They're from a great company, but they supply to a lot of dyers. And with the pandemic came a very large shortage of wool. And there was a lot of people not able to get the bases that they needed to maintain their business. And I thought to myself, well, I don't want to buy up stock again for something that I don't necessarily need for my own survival. So I started looking into other options. What can I do? Maybe this is an opportunity for me to diversify things a little bit. And so I started working with a mill that's up in Maine,
Mhm.
and it uses American wool. So it's kind of a little bit more grounding for me, where I'm working with a more local supplier. I'm using more local product that's in the wool. I've taken that approach. So it was part supply and part, well, what happens if I change things up and I try to align a little bit more with the way I personally do my spending,
Right.
and how the types of businesses that I choose to support. So that was some of the reasoning behind it. Um, I didn't really get anything that was negative. I think it was just different because they were always so used to like the two ply. I have, my project that I've been working on here. So they've always been seeing like the two ply, the twist here, the 75-25 merino nylon, and now it's a 90-10
Right.
wool and nylon blend. So it's a lot higher of the wool content. Um, so I think it was a little bit of a change there because it's a different texture, but I think it also carries a different purpose because as I've worked with this new yarn, the stitch definition is outstanding. So if you're doing any kind of texture work in a knitting project, it absolutely shines. It looks fantastic with this yarn. So I'm happy with the change, and I've like gone back and forth. I'm like, do I want to bring the other one back? Do I not? It's I don't know. It's an always evolving thought process for me of how I'm going to stock things, how I'm going to run the business, what I'm going to have. It's always changing.
What about the colors? So some of the colors that you used to dye, like I don't see them in your store right now, right? So like a while ago when Stephen West came up with his Pierre shawl. I made a Pierre shawl out of your fingering yarn, and the pattern is for decay, but I did it in fingering, and I did it so you had that whole series of cranberry bog.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a dear friend of mine who lives near Cranberry Bog, and we go to visit her like in every season. And so there is like the cranberries on the snow and the cranberries during the fall, and you had like all those cranberry colors. And I made the entire PR show out of your colors for that.
Yeah.
Um, do you come back to colors that like you used to do, or you always looking for something else?
There are certain colors that I always want to come back to, and that's one of them. I I changed most of the dyes that I use now as well, so they are heavy metal free dyes. So it's different than the ones that I'd been using prior. So now it's like I'm coming up with all of these brand new formulas to make these colors. But cranberry, that's one of my favorites. That is definitely coming back
I
for
love
later
that
this
color.
year.
And it was so perfect because red is like very difficult. I mean, it's like that perfect shade of lipstick, you know? It's like
Yeah.
you have to find just the right red, and it was just like so precise. And it's funny, like I'm gonna post a couple pictures here because she's a photographer also, and she takes all these pictures of the bog. And so there were like her pictures of cranberries, and then I posted like the shawl right side by side, and you can see it's like matches exactly. It was like you caught all those like little, because if you look at cranberry, it's not one color. There's like variation of little, it's like some lighter spots and some darker spots, and that it was like so spot on.
See, it's true to nature. It's what I try to go for.
Right. Well, thank you so very much for being my guest today. I really truly enjoyed it. And I
Yeah,
hope
thank you.
I'm gonna keep on looking at what else you're gonna come up with. I love seeing your new colors and your new work.
Yeah, there is more to come soon.
Thank you.